the multidimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining me. As you know, my mission is to bring the intuitive spirit back to medicine in practical and tangible ways so that we can experience more peace, love, and joy in our everyday lives and access deeper healing. So, I'm coming to you today at the end of a day in my office, and I have been meditating. And as you might know, that each week I'll meditate on what to talk about. And this week, the topic came as somewhat of a surprise because I felt called to talk about near death experiences. And I'm not really sure why. At least at first I wasn't really clear why because I thought, okay, well that's going to be I've written a little bit about it in my book, but I haven't talked about it quite as much. But why is that relevant now? Well, first, it's a curious and chaotic time where the timelines seem to collide, and some days seem to go by quickly, and then some days time seems to stand still. And I've personally experienced both those extremes in the last few weeks. Second, near death experiences, or NDEs for short, also remind us that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Can't emphasize that enough. Third, there can be some similarities between near death experiences and some other more common experiences, such as undergoing surgery or surviving a trauma of some sort. And fourth, because integrating the body, mind, and spirit is so important to our overall health and feeling fully alive and present in this human experience. There's so many more like beautiful and miraculous aspects to NDEs that we can talk about. And I'm going to share some of the stories that I've been gathering over the years from family, from friends, from patients, from stories that I heard as well, or from books. And some of these stories are blissful. More typically, they are a combination of both joy and pain, and that's it's a way of moving through a moment of surviving death, really. And there's a Netflix documentary series on that as well. And others are more difficult experiences. And I'm going to go through several different accounts to help you understand more about near death experiences. So the first one is from one of my cousins, and he had a major car accident. And everything came together just miraculously because he was found, he was helicoptered out, and he was in a coma for a long time. And um, my aunt, who I feel is a very spiritual person, she really um, prayed every single day that a miracle would occur because we really didn't know what was going to happen. And when I talked to my dad, and he was asking me, at the time, I was a new pediatrician, I was a new mom, and I was surprised that he asked me for what to do, because he said that he had talked to the intensivist, and he said that it didn't look good, and he wasn't sure what to do or what to say to the family, to say to our family, our extended family. And I just remember saying to him, I was like, well, whatever you say, whatever you do, don't lose hope. Because even if there's a sliver of hope, then it's a possibility. And even if it feels like a miracle, if there's a sliver of hope, then we can step into that possibility. So that was part of it. And then my cousin, he he came out of the coma. I think it was about a month, and he remembers seeing and talking to relatives that had passed and had gone, that were no longer alive. and he was, wondering why they were there, and he was in and out of like knowing what was going on with his body and what was going on in the ordinary 3D reality. But he had this comfort of relatives that were helping him through the whole experience. So for him, it was a joyful time that carried him through a really traumatic experience. And, and I've heard this from other patients as well, where they had an accident. I had one patient and friend who had been in a major accident, and he could feel himself being lifted out of his body, and he just remembers being in excruciating pain. And then when he was lifted out of his body, then he remembers feeling really good and looking down at his body and understanding that there was a lot going on. But so his was much shorter. But then when he came back into his body, he remembers feeling like, oh, I'm not sure, I want to feel this pain, but he came right back. And so there was like that mix of experiences. I had another patient who had somewhat of a similar experience, but this was actually not through an accident. He was actually had major surgery, and just remembers having this blissful experience where he was everything was like this spectacular light all around, and it's like colors that you couldn't describe. And when he came back to his body, then there was a lot like he still had to like heal through and get through. And so this is the more typical description that I'm talking about, where it's a mixture of both pain and joy. So seeing and feeling like these sensations, these colors that are indescribable in the 3D, and then feelings of bliss and joy, but then also returning to a body that you may or may not remember everything it's gone through. And so this can feel like a traumatic experience. I mean, it is a traumatic experience, but there's different experiences going on in one person, in one being, because you have your consciousness going through one experience where it can have like this joyful experience, maybe through the surgery, like one of my patients, and then coming back, and the body went through a different situation because it went through a surgery. It was cut through, even though there was anesthesia to help, so you didn't feel necessarily the physical pain during the surgery at the time. It was still a traumatic experience for the body, and then of course all the healing afterwards. So there can sometimes be this dichotomy in a surgery experience, whether or not you've had a near-death experience or any other traumatic experience. And so in the healing work that I do, then part of it is actually to help integrate that body, mind, and spirit again. And so when you have a dichotomy where your consciousness had one experience and the body had another experience, sometimes we have to share and bring them back together so that the body can know some of the bliss and the joy that the consciousness experienced in a near-death experience, and the soul or the spirit, that your awareness can also be aware of the pain that the body went through. And in doing this and coming together, then there's an integration and more harmony where we can heal at a deeper level. So if you have had any experiences that feel really traumatic, they can feel similar to a near-death experience where maybe you felt like you dissociated or partially dissociated or numbed out in a way. And then what happens is that there's a split, and your awareness is going through one experience, and then the body's going through another experience. And the point of healing is bringing it all back together. So you don't necessarily have had to gone through a near-death experience to go through what feels like this dichotomy or a split in your being, but all healing is bringing it back together. How do you do that? In various ways. It's what I do in all the appointments of tending to the whole being of the body, mind, and spirit. But you can also use your breath work and awareness. So just breathing into your body, breathing into the areas that might have experienced some difficulties, breathing to and with a desire to understand what the body's been through. And then say if you've had a near-death experience and you did have some joy and blissful experience, is to be able to share some of that with the body so that you're having this conversation and coming together as this whole being. And now, if you haven't had a near-death experience, most of us haven't, but you can, when you numb out, you are still in this altered awareness. It's not fully grounded. And so there is some joy that you can feel, or it's a way, it's a coping to get through. So you can still share that with your body, and you can still ask your body to share like what it has been through and if there's any messages for you. And your body works together with your being, with your spirit, and can bring in messages from beyond, from spirit, from the stillness, from the universe, however you'd like to call it. And so that way you can share with your conscious awareness. So with your mind is that conduit between the spirit and the body and helps to bring it together. So you can choose with your mind to have this conversation, to ask the body what it's been through, and you can choose with your mind to have the body listen with your breath to the spirit. So you can actively breathe into your body, and that inspiration is breathing in spirit and the expiration is breathing out. So you have this flow, and in that way you can integrate the body, mind, and spirit. Now there's many other ways to do this as well. You can integrate through through any art medium, whether it's through writing, through drawing, through coloring, through poetry. And that's another way to access the spirit with our conscious awareness. And then when we feel these things, when we feel the vibrations of it with our physical body, then we are also integrating those vibrations and that awareness. And that is healing. So it there are there are so many other near-death experiences in books, in movies and documentaries, and I'm going to share with you a couple of other ones because there was one in the Netflix documentary Surviving Death. And so this one was where this woman described hers was not as blissful an experience because she had some premonitions of her near-death experience and she was really frightened by it. So she felt herself float out of her body and then fortunately come back into her body. But the experience frightened her. And so in her case, it was more of a purely like traumatic experience, and she missed not being able to experience like the joy of it that she had heard from other near-death experiences. So in that case, then you approach it more like a trauma, a pure trauma, and use things that you would help to release the pain or the patterns created by the trauma, and to help process it so that you can feel more integrated back into your body. Because again, whether or not there was a joyful experience to it or not, then there's a separation and it's feeling of like needing the feeling of returning back home. But you want that home to feel more comfortable. And when the home is not comfortable, your physical body, then sometimes there feels like there's this need to stay numbed out in a way, or not completely grounded, not completely embodied. And there is another story in just I forget where I had seen it, but I watched this documentary and it is called The Butterfly People. And this is really interesting. I don't know if you've heard of this before because this was from 2011 and I just recently heard about it. So this was about a tornado in 2011 that hit Joplin, Missouri, and killed 161 people. It just went through so quickly, and it was an EF5 tornado, which is the most violent type of tornado with speeds over 200 miles per hour. So really hard for us to conceive. and hard for anyone to really understand unless you've been through it. So in this experience, there were multiple people, especially kids. There were at least over a dozen accounts of people during this tornado where the whole city was completely flattened and people were in their cars when they were in the tornado. So there were many accounts of people seeing what they called butterfly people, and the butterfly people appeared and they would cover or shield people or keep the debris from hitting them, and saved many of these people's lives, which is absolutely incredible. And some of the kids afterwards like drew what they call the butterfly people, and it looked like you could call them angels, or it looked like, fairies or something, because they had like colorful wings, and they described the lights like surrounded by rainbows, and or pure bright white lights with rainbows around them. There are various descriptions. And some psychologists or trauma people were saying that, well, maybe it's just hallucinations, but you can't have multiple people hallucinating the same thing. And so, regardless of what you believe in, these kinds of experiences can really be helpful into expanding our perspective, to just acknowledging that we don't know everything. We don't know for sure what happens, and we don't know for sure, how people made it through some of these terrible um, situations. Like, one of the descriptions that they described was they were in the shelter, so the family survived, but a car had been flown and landed on the exit of the shelter, so they couldn't get out of it. And they were just, everyone's just sitting there praying. I mean, what else can you do? And they just, prayed for a way out. And out of nowhere, a ladder just flew in and like through the place, the door that was completely covered, and they couldn't lift it. And they were able to get out. And so that is really strange and wild and bizarre and miraculous. When you know those stories are out there, I feel like it can help give us some hope and help expand our perspective that, yeah, miraculous things can happen. And last time I talked about how the little things are the big things, and there are miracles in the mundane, and there are also big miracles as well. And so I guess that's part of it when we're talking about these near death experiences, that there we can remember and we can share. And I feel like part of the reason those people survived and were able to tell that story is for us to hear it, and to give us some hope of, yeah, somehow everything is okay. And that is the message that some of them got, that when they saw these butterfly people, that everything is okay. And many of these near death experiences that are described, they have this overwhelming feeling that everything is okay. And that doesn't mean that in the 3D that everything was really okay, because they were going through really traumatic situations. And there were injuries that took many months and years to recover from. So in that sense, you might not feel like everything is okay, but they had this feeling that everything was okay and that they're cared for. And if we can tap into and remember that feeling, we can bring that to our body, to our minds, to our emotions, and with our pure spirit. And this is how we are going to navigate a chaotic world, is that we're going to remember that somehow we are cared for and everything is okay, even though it seems like it's not, even though it feels painful, even though there's chaos, that we can get through this and we can take the steps that we need to. So it may not be easy, but we are not alone. We are here together. And if we remember that guidance from spirit, from these stories that people come back and can tell us, then we know that this is not all there is to it. And we remember that there must be some greater purpose of why we're all here. And perhaps it's to be able to see what we can do in these challenging moments and see what we can create out of it anyway. So to focus on what can you bring? What can you, and if it's your gift of presence, there's that line that Oprah said before, it's just, what we need is for more people to feel alive. You don't have to be to figure out what your purpose is, but you just to feel alive. And so if more people feel more fully alive, then that's what we need to create a world where we really bring more heaven on earth and more peace, love, and joy. Because in the world as it is, with all the chaos and what's going on, you can see that there are many people that are not in touch with spirit, and they are not in touch with that peace and joy. Because if they were, they wouldn't be behaving or acting in that way. But that doesn't mean that you can't. And so that's what we can do, is to bring our presence and to bring that love and joy so that we can integrate body, mind, and spirit and create in the world from that perspective. And if you ever feel like you're splitting, that's okay. It's a coping mechanism. But when you have the opportunity, look at it, acknowledge it, thank your body, mind, spirit for helping you. Even if it meant that you became ungrounded and numbed out, it's okay. It got you through. Now, once you realize it and acknowledge it, take the steps to tend to it, because you are worthwhile and you are worth it. And we need you to be here so that we can do this all together. So I hope that helped you in some way. Thank you so much for being here with me on later on a Thursday. And lots of love to all of you. If you'd like to connect with me in other ways, please do. You can on Instagram and All Worlds Health. You can on Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. And I send out an e-love letter once a week, usually on Wednesdays. You can sign up for those on my website, allworldshealth.com. If you have any questions on this subject or any others, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. These are sometimes like esoteric topics that we are diving into. So there's not like a right or wrong to it. And the more we're willing to explore some things that might not feel completely comfortable at first, but are really important to understanding ourselves as human beings, then the more healing that we can access together. And if there's anyone that you feel could benefit from these messages, then please share it with them. Lots of love to all of you. I believe in you, and I hope that you believe in you too. Take care. Bye.